Hey, MichMash listeners, we've got a bonus episode for you today.
That's right. Alethia and I were in Ferndale last week recording a live episode before an audience, and we are bringing you the second part right now.
Enjoy our conversation with Adrian Hemond and Anna Heaton, two political communication pros from Lansing.
So much of what's happening right now in Lansing will help shape what the candidates are talking about heading into 2026. And we have another great pair of guests to help us look ahead. Adrian Hemond is CEO of Grassroots Midwest, and Anna Heaton is Vice President of Resch Strategies. They both have years of working inside and outside of state government, working on campaigns and around campaigns, and they bring a very sharp eye to what's happening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
So we have said this before, we will say it again, probably many, many, many times. Michigan has never had an open governor's race and an open U.S. Senate seat in the same year, until now. So Governor Whitmer, of course, is term limited and cannot seek re-election in 2026. U.S. Senator Gary Peters announced that he was retiring earlier this year. And now we have these two unexpected seats. So how has the unexpected Senate seat kind of shooken up both races?
I didn't think things could get more shaken until now. I think that we're looking at unprecedented spending. I think we say that every 2 years in Michigan, but certainly now. I think that it's going to draw away from the gubernatorial race. You know, some of the people we thought were going to run for governor are now kind of stepping over to the side and jumping into the Senate race instead. So it really created this divide of people deciding, oh no, which race am I going to go for now? And some people jumped right in and some people are still on the sidelines, but it was kind of chaotic here for a while and still is.
I mean, Adrian, what did you make of it? Once Peters made his decision, there was always a few people we knew were thinking about running for governor, and then all of a sudden the entire top political prospects list had to look things over.
Yeah, well, it was very unexpected for Senator Peters to retire, and I think it shocked a lot of Democrats and Republicans that this opportunity would come up. When you think about it, the United States Senate is an exceptionally old institution, and someone voluntarily retiring when they're around Medicare eligibility is actually kind of unheard of, right? Yes. I mean, we were giving kudos to Senator Stabenow for retiring in her mid-70s just a year and a half ago and saying that was early. And so I don't think anybody was really expecting this. And look, you only have to run for the Senate every 6 years. And so if you are an ambitious politician with the requisite sort of public profile and ability to raise money, you have to look at this, right? If you're a member of Congress, you're running every 2 years right now. And that is a miserable existence compared to only running every 6 years. Like, I make money off of campaigns and I want a break.
It feels like the first thing we have to discuss in the governor's race is Mike Duggan. I mean, this was the big surprise at the end of 2024. He's trying to do something that no one's ever done in Michigan, win the governor's race without being affiliated with a political party, running as an independent. Anna, how's he doing so far?
I think he's doing well so far. So right out of the gate, he is very popular equally with both parties, which was shocking to some. I think when he first announced, Republicans were a little smug, thinking he's just going to draw from the Democratic base. This is great for us. And then in the most recent poll that I reviewed, he's equally liked by Republicans and Democrats and really high favorability ratings. And so, he has low name ID outstate. That was very expected. But he is off and running. If you've been on any pure Michigan travel this summer, he's had billboards all up and down 127. Or I-75. He has billboards in West Michigan I saw over the weekend. So he is working hard. He has so many advantages and so many disadvantages being an independent. As Emily said earlier, there's kind of these undercover, under the radar independent voters in Michigan that I think could surge. But he has to introduce himself to so many people. And how do you do that when you don't have that base of party support, right? So if you're a Republican, you know certain families in West Michigan, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I need you to introduce me to 5 of your most powerful, influential friends. When you're an independent, you don't have that base of party support to draw on, to have fundraisers, to have events, to write checks. So where is he going to find these bases of support to grow his name ID is very TBD.
So I want to try to tease out some hot takes here. Do we, does Mike Duggan really have a realistic chance at being governor running without party affiliation?
So it's a really interesting question, and a person who doesn't know a ton about Mike Duggan and Michigan politics would obviously say no. The same way that they would have said no if you had asked them, hey, what do you think about a white guy moving from Livonia into the city of Detroit to run for mayor as a write-in? Sound good? People would have laughed at you like a crazy person, and yet Mike Duggan has been mayor of Detroit for a few terms now. And so I think it's a mistake to bet against him. Everything that Anna said is correct in terms of the challenge that he's facing. But if there is anyone in Michigan politics that can do it, it's Mike Duggan, both because of the skill he has and the Rolodex that he has outside of just politics, right, which I think is super important, but also he has sky-high name ID in the Metro Detroit media market, which is where half the people in Michigan live, in the Metro Detroit media market. Chad's newspaper, the Detroit News, just a couple weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, had a poll come out. Mayor Duggan in the city of Detroit has favorability ratings in the 80s. He's a politician, not a pop star, right? Not an influencer. He's a politician, and he's got approval ratings in the city he governs that are in the 80s, and he's on television in the state's largest media market every single day. And so Anna's exactly right. His name ID outside of the Metro Detroit media market is completely insufficient to be governor, but he has enough name ID in the Metro Detroit media market that he basically doesn't need to worry about that right now. He can focus all of his energy outstate. So it's a tall mountain to climb. I understand why he's doing it, but he's probably the only one that could credibly attempt it.
So the Democratic field for governor feels pretty settled, even though it's early. So we have Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, and Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson. Do you think Secretary Benson is the front runner right now? Do you think that's fair to say? And then also, if she's not, how do Swanson and Gilchrist get in the mix?
I mean, I think you have to call her the front runner right now, partly just because the other two candidates are so far behind. Chris Swanson is, by all accounts, been a good sheriff in Genesee County who's pretty popular there. But Genesee County is relatively small in the grand scheme of things, and he's unknown outside of that area. Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist's problem is even worse, right? If you are one of the people like the four of us who spends a lot of time in the environs of the state capitol, you know who Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist is because he's 6'7". He's impossible to miss, right? But most people in the state have no idea who he is, even in the area that's supposed to be his base of support. The only time that Garland Gilchrist's name was on the ballot by himself, without Governor Whitmer, was when he ran for clerk of the city of Detroit against Janice Winfrey, who's not popular, and he lost pretty badly.
Yeah, right after he announced, the governor came out and said, I won't be endorsing. And her team, I thought, very masterfully downplayed it. Like, well, of course she's not going to. Like, that's silly. And I thought, really? Because typically a governor does endorse their lieutenant governor. It's kind of the quid pro quo. You've served under me for all this time. You've been loyal. You've worked hard. You get no glory. Here you go. And she made the case at the time when she said, I won't be endorsing. It doesn't help. Lieutenant governor has never gone on to be governor before anyway. But she's also really popular still. For being in the last quarter, essentially, of her governorship, her approval ratings are super high. And so if she was going to throw him a bone, he might have a shot if she's out campaigning with him. But if she doesn't, he's going to have a tough time.
Even if he could put it on a piece of mail, I think. Right. Even if she never showed up with him anywhere, and he could just send out mailers, I think it would be beneficial.
So the Republican field, in contrast, seems likely to expand. Right now, Congressman John James from just across to Quinder, He's in the race. Eric Nesbitt, the minority leader in the state Senate. He's from Southwest Michigan. Mike Cox, former attorney general. They're all in the race, but there seems like there's a lot of people who are talking about getting in the race still, Anna, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, John James is off to a formidable start for sure. I think that that's probably going to scare some people. Tudor Dixon is always a possibility. She was an unknown last time around. She did okay. And I think the elephant in this race, see what I did there?
Yeah.
Is the
Well done.
the Trump endorsement, because I think a lot of people are like, it's a foregone conclusion he loves John James. Well, not necessarily, right? I think President Trump gets a crush on someone, but it's not necessarily a long-term relationship. So he had a crush on John James. He might have moved on. And so there's still room if he endorses John James, I think that's going to be tough to surpass. But yeah, I think there's still people looking at it. Tom Leonard, maybe one. Tudor Dixon definitely, I think, is still looking at it. But John James is really off to a strong start.
And Kevin Rinke's also just like running for governor without announcing. Like that's been going on for months.
Definitely, yeah.
Not many people are paying attention, but he's doing it.
Yeah.
Adrian, who do you think the Democrats don't want to run against? It was pretty clear in 2018 the Republicans did not want to run against Gretchen Whitmer, and they ended up having to deal with her and lost.
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to run against John James, right? And, that might sound silly to say. I mean, he has lost statewide twice, right? But he's, all joking aside, he's formidable, right? He definitely has the ability to raise money. He definitely is very photogenic. He has, he's demonstrated an ability to win some tough elections in CD10 now. I don't think that there are any of those Republican candidates, whether they're in the race or they might get in the race, that are unbeatable. But I think he's certainly the strongest Republican candidate right now, and Democrats would rather run against someone weaker, like Tudor Dixon. I mean, that's granted very different political environments, but I mean, she lost by almost 10 points in 2022. That was a wretched time to be on the ballot with an R next to your name. I think Democrats would rather run against her than John James.
So there's a long-standing pattern in Michigan where when the governor is term limited or doesn't seek re-election, voters tend to want to go with the opposing party, right? So if you're the Republican candidate for governor, whether you're John James or someone else, are you going into this with an advantage?
I don't know. I mean, that's a great answer, right? That's why everybody came to hear me say, I don't know, on stage. Everything you just said is correct. The countervailing force there is that it's a midterm election for Donald Trump, right? Midterm elections are typically wretched for presidents absent some sort of outside factor, right? George W. Bush had a pretty decent midterm in 2002, but there were some extraneous circumstances, I would call them, that may have led to that. Typically, presidents get beat up in their midterm elections, but then on the other side of that, we typically flop back and forth parties for governors. Before Whitmer, it was Snyder. Before Snyder, it was Granholm. Before that, it was Engler. Before that, it was Blanchard, and on we go.
So let's pivot to the U.S. Senate race. We talked a little bit about that at the top. Two parties seem to be in totally different places. Adrian, the Democrats have what appears to be their first serious, wide-open primary for a U.S. Senate seat in 30 years. There's 4 candidates in the race. What do you make of what's happening so far? It doesn't feel like the forces are going to rally around one person like they did with Slotkin or Gary Peters or Debbie Stabenow in the past.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be some attempt to do that around Haley Stevens, but there is a fight going on within the Democratic Party right now where there is an insurgent progressive faction that has struggled right at the ballot, but that wields a lot of influence in the Democratic coalition. Right, you've heard some of the what folks on the left are calling abundance bros that have been referring to these folks as the groups, right? Environmental groups, LGBT groups, et cetera, interest groups within the Democratic coalition that are more progressive than the median Democratic voter, and those folks want to push left in the party. Abdul El-Sayed, who's one of the candidates for U.S. Senate, is a great example of that. but there are others. I think that you're going to see an attempt by organized labor and some of the more establishment forces within the Democratic Party to rally around Congresswoman Haley Stevens. But I don't know that that's going to be as successful as the sort of masterful stage managing that Senators Stabenow and Peters did to anoint Alyssa Slotkin, the U.S. Senate candidate last year. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they are going to have to fight it out. I think Stevens ultimately will win that, but that doesn't mean that it won't be nasty or there won't be some hurt feelings.
So, Anna, the Republican side is completely different. We have former U.S. Rep. Mike Rogers, who was the candidate last time around. He jumped in the race, and it's been quiet since then. Do you expect another Republican to jump in? Is he going to just have this nomination zipped up already?
It certainly seems that way. So he has a lot going for him, right? He ran last time. I think he lost by about 19,000 votes, which for a statewide election is crazy thin margins. He got in a lot earlier this time around than he did last term. He is a national security expert at a time when that's top of mind for many voters. And so it seems like he has it locked down. You know, Bill Huizenga has been rumored to be getting in, of course, West Michigan congressman, and I don't really think he's going to. I think he is, you know, he's had many terms in Congress. He didn't get a gavel this term. He's upset about it. He wants to poke people in the eye a little bit. And he just doesn't bring necessarily anything different than Mike Rogers does, right? They both served in the state legislature. They both served in Congress. I think it would have to be someone maybe a little, just very different to bring a different energy. Someone like a Tudor Dixon, maybe, who is younger, who has a huge media presence to bring out voters to get excited about another candidate. But right now, he's a solid front runner.
It seems like everyone's waiting on to see what President Trump does here. It's interesting that he hasn't endorsed so far. Of course, the Republican leadership in the U.S. Senate has said, we want Mike Rogers. Anything to make of that Trump has kept his endorsement on ice, at least so far?
He's kind of a last-minute endorser, right? He doesn't tend to show his cards up front. So, but yes, there could be a reason for it. He could be talking to someone else who's behind the scenes getting ready to get in the race. Who that may be, I don't know.
So we talked a little bit about sort of the traditional midterm dynamics. The president's party usually does poorly in a midterm. So does this help? How much does this help the Democrats heading into this election cycle? Or does it get kind of caught up in the wash over this kind of weird governor's race we have, where you have the usual, maybe the Republicans would have a leg up with the time for change, and you got Duggan in there mixing things up too?
Want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. Look, I don't know that there's any advantage, disadvantage for them. I do think some of that comes out in the wash between these sort of countervailing forces, but also Democrats just lost pretty badly last year, right? Like it was, the presidential election was close in terms of, you know, the overall popular vote. President Trump didn't win a majority, but he essentially swept all the swing states, right? And Democrats are still smarting from that, and there is this battle going on within the Democratic Party about what sort of party they're going to be, which those chickens are going to come home to roost for Republicans eventually, but not until Donald Trump is out of office, right? Having power cures a lot of that. We'd be having a very different conversation if Kamala Harris had won the election last year. Republicans would be in that spot. But you know, this is not an unusual thing after a sort of crushing electoral loss. I mean, you think about what happened after 1984, which was worse than this for Democrats, but is probably the closest modern analog, right? Where they just lost everything. They were in the wilderness for a little while. And what got them back into the presidency and got them winning elections consistently around the country was staking out this centrist new Democrat brand of Democrat like Bill Clinton and Al Gore, folks like that. Now, the country's very different socially and politically, right? The areas of the country that the presidency moves through, the areas of Michigan that determine things like legislative majorities and who's going to be the next governor, those are all different. But Democrats have got to have that fight now, just like Republicans are going to have that fight when Donald Trump's out of office.
So we have some great audience questions here. I love that the audience is asking about statewide ballot proposals. Good on all of you. That is fantastic.
I love that.
Okay. As of late, there have been many voter suppression proposals or tactics introduced in the Michigan House and ballot initiatives. So there is a proposal that is, I believe, now collecting signatures that would require people to provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote, require voter ID when voting in person, providing a copy of voter ID if you vote absentee. That's what this person's talking about here. So how do you think this proposal, if passed, will affect the 2026 and future elections? Either of you want to take a shot at that one? Required proof of citizenship to register to vote and vote.
So I love this question because we're in the midst of a political realignment in this country, and this, if this passes, it's going to work out exactly the opposite of the way that the authors of this amendment intended, by which I mean it's going to help Democrats a lot. Right? What's going on with the realignment right now is that Democrats are becoming the party of affluent, college-educated elites in this country. And I say that as a wealthy, college-educated elite who is a Democrat, right? That's... as that happens more and more over time, making it harder to vote is actually good, right? The best turnout machine that we have seen in the last 10 years is a fellow by the name of Donald J. Trump, right? That's what brings inconsistent voters to the polls. Democrats don't bring inconsistent voters to the polls. We bring people with advanced degrees to the polls, right? One of the very best predictors of how likely you are to vote for a Democrat is how close you live to an institution of higher learning. Let's check some IDs.
All right. All right, next question. What do you think the top issue of the governor's election in 2026 will be? Anna, what do you think? What's likely to be the dominating issue among the candidates?
I think it has to be, well, I'm going to pick two. Economy is going to be top of mind. You know, the economy and education. The governor has these super high approval ratings, Governor Whitmer does, and yet by the counts of data that we can look at, the things that are top of mind for voters are not going so great in Michigan, right? Our education system is abysmal. We've been getting tons of headlines about this lately. It's embarrassing, the education that kids are getting. And then the economy, the unemployment rate is, I think, at its highest in about 4 years. So education and economic concerns, unemployment, cost of living, inflation still, I think, will be top of mind.
All right. You want me to keep rolling with another one here? Okay, I'm the designated question asker. Senator Alyssa Slotkin has faced considerable backlash in recent months. What do you make of it, and do you think she will feel the effects of that in her re-election campaign? And that will not be until 2030, but it does seem like, you know, there's a progressive wing that's maybe not thrilled, and of course, I don't think the Trump wing has her on any, gift lists or anything like that either.
You know, it's very interesting. Senator Slotkin has been building a national profile for herself. And it has been in alignments with the abundance bro faction of the Democratic Party, of which I consider myself a proud member. So I should just get my priors out there for everybody. But she has been trying to position herself around the median Democrat in the Democratic Party. And that is, in fact, one route that is available to Democrats right now, right? The median voter in the Democratic coalition right now is a black woman with a bachelor's degree, right? That's what our median voter looks like. And she's done a very good job of positioning herself around that voter. The second part of the question is real easy, and you answered it. She's not on the ballot again for 5 years. So, it's sort of like that Donald Trump line, right, about, shooting somebody dead in the street or whatever. Like, she can't do that, but basically anything else, and the voters won't remember in 5 years.
Well, I find Alyssa Slotkin really interesting because you have some Democrats criticizing her as, not progressive enough. And I think I saw one thing after the State of the Union speech, like this is why we're going to keep losing. But she won. She won Michigan when Donald Trump also won Michigan. Like, she was the one Democrat that was able to come through. I'll read this one because it was personally addressed to me.
Okay.
So I'll take one. The first half, Dave, I'm not going to read because I think we talked about Duggan and him pulling votes from Democrats. But what does John James actually have a platform that resonates with voters? What is John James's platform? This is the question that I'm reading. I did not say that personally, for the record.
John James has the name ID of Beyonce, essentially. He can sneeze and get headlines. He can be on Fox News any day, 8 times a day if he wants to. His favorability ratings in the poll I saw were a little bit underwater. That didn't totally surprise me. So I think, he just won the seat in Congress. It was incredibly expensive. He finally got what he wanted. He won a race, and now he wants to do something else. And I think that where he has to come out strong is he needs to tell the voters why. Why does he want to run for governor? Why now? Why are you in D.C. and now you want to come back to Michigan and do this? So, he has a platform. I don't know that he's done a masterful job yet of telling people what it is. And as, probably the people in this room know, Lansing politics and Lansing issues are very different from D.C. issues. So he has a platform in D.C., which is national defense, which is immigration, but those issues don't necessarily translate to the governorship. So again, he has to come up with his why and his story about what he's going to fix in Michigan and reach voters that way a little bit better, I think.
Anna just made a really important point, which is, and this applies to John James, but it applies to literally every other candidate for elected office, right? Which is, your job as a candidate for elected office is to answer the question for voters, what do I get if you win? Right? And if you answer that question correctly for 50% plus one of the voters, congratulations, you win. And that has been a place that John James has always struggled, right? He's obviously very charismatic. He's photogenic. He can raise money. He commands media attention. He's got a lot of things going for him. But answering that question of what do I get if you win has been a struggle.
Well, Adrian and Anna, thank you so much for joining us. And that is going to do it for this live episode. We want to thank Emily and Chad also. Thanks to our fantastic venue, Go Comedy Improv Theater, and tonight's sponsor, the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association. A huge thank you to the entire team at WDET, Detroit Public Radio, for all the work they do to bring MichMash to life and to promote this event, especially our producer, Hernz Laguerre Jr. Round of applause for Hernz, please. We at Gongwer News Service are so pleased to partner with WDET on MichMash, and most of all, thanks to all of you for joining us and to all of you listeners for listening. We'll talk to you next week.